forward, we'll have a copy of this presentation available on our project website. Thank you all for joining me, for joining our team. My name is Megan Oliver. Before we get started, I'm going to kick it over to Steve Lafferty to say a few words of welcome. And I know that Councilman Marks has to leave shortly, so hopefully we can give him a moment to speak as well. So Steve, take it away.
Megan, thank you very, very much. I appreciate the opportunity to say hello to those who are attending virtually tonight. And to the councilman, thank you, councilman, for joining us. I can't say enough about the planning department's team and efforts led by Megan Oliver and Amy Mante and planners in the community planning division for working so hard to bring the small area plan together. The engagement in the community has been very positive and beneficial. We hope to continue to get more input as we move towards a final report. But the importance of this plan can't be overstated because this sector of the county is a growing area with many dynamic communities and many dynamic leaders that we know are fully engaged. And once again, appreciate those of you who are attending tonight because we are moving into the final stages. And so your voices are very important to us. Megan, thank you very much for giving me a moment. And Councilman, I'll toss it to you.
Well, thank you very much, Director Lafferty, and thank you everyone who's on this call tonight. And I apologize, I have to leave early. I have two community meetings I have to go to, but I'll echo what Director Lafferty said. There has been a tremendous amount of outreach by planning department staff and multiple Zoom meetings now, multiple in-person meetings with stakeholders, and I appreciate all the input you're providing. This is kind of like a good housekeeping seal of approval, right? You make suggestions, they're incorporated into planning documents, they are used by the executive and the legislature in making priorities. So I want to thank you all for your input and look forward to getting the draft plan.
Thank you so much, Councilman. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Before we begin, I know we've got about an hour and a half scheduled for our meeting. My hope is to gift some of you all back some of your time. So we're going to be pretty efficient, and I'm looking forward to the discussion that we'll be having at the end. So again, welcome. This is the Small Area Plan 11, public meeting number 2. Before we get started, I'd also like to share land acknowledgement. So today we are gathering, albeit virtually, on the traditional treaty territory of the Piscataway people who have called this land home for more than 10,000 years. With tremendous respect for the intimate relationships between place and people, we acknowledge and uphold the treaties of the First Peoples. We recognize, support, and advocate for the sovereignty of Maryland's Indigenous nations, for historic Indigenous communities, for Indigenous peoples who live here today, and for those who are forcibly removed from their homelands. We pay respect to the Piscataway people, past, present, and future, and to their continued presence on this land. Thank you. So we just heard from Director Steve Lafferty. Joining us also this evening, we have some other folks from the Department of Planning. We have Deputy Director Amy Mante, the Chief of the Community Planning Division, Gane Jope, myself, Megan Oliver. I'm the District 6 Community Planner and the lead for this Area 11 plan. I'm joined also by Iyad Abdi, the District 5 Community Planner, and Jess Elliott Meyer, who's a brand new hire. She's joining us as the District 7 Community Planner. We're also joined by our consultant team from Air St. Gross. We have Amber Wendland, Laura Wheaton, and Will Story. This team has been a fantastic resource to the county. They're helping us to chart the path forwards that this, which is the first of what will be many small area plans, sets a precedent for how we move forward with the remaining set of plans throughout the county. Quick agenda of tonight's meeting. We're going to recap Master Plan 2030, just high level recap so we can all make sure we're on the same page, understanding the purpose of small area plans. We'll talk about and summarize some of the input that we've heard so far through the planning process. We'll then jump into talking about a concept plan and how we're going to connect back to Master Plan 2030 with the recommendations that we're defining for Small Area Plan Area 11. That will lead us into our discussion, and then I'll close out with a couple of next steps, a few more opportunities for folks to weigh in and be involved as we move into the final stage of this planning process. So first, the Master Plan 2030. This is the county's really the guiding plan for how the county hopes to evolve and grow over the coming years, over the next decade. It establishes policies that will guide decisions for development, public services, resource management, and protection. And it was created through a planning process that was pretty extensive. We collected almost 4,000 individual comments, which then fed into and informed the plan. The plan, if you've not seen it, is published in both the traditional print document, but you can also find it online. You can use this QR code to access it, but you can also easily just search for the Master Plan 2030 Baltimore County, and you'll be able to jump right to it. The important thing in the Master Plan 2030 for tonight's discussion is that it identified place types. A lot of those comments that we heard talked about the need to consider land use development and sustaining communities throughout the county. And so their place types were mapped throughout the county. We used a lot of data to figure out the best place where retrofitting and redevelopment might occur in the county. I want you to pay attention to this red brick color here. Those are nodes. Those are where we really think commercial or redevelopment it would be most suitable throughout the county. And this map you're looking at with the Master Plan 2030 set the stage for us creating these small area plans. What's a small area plan? It's going to be, this is one of what will be 12 small area plans throughout the county, and each of those small area plans will reflect the unique needs of those unique areas and the aspirations of their residents and stakeholders. It will achieve that by taking the Master Plan 2030 goals and applying them at the community level. It's fine-tuning and aligning the recommendations that were outlined in the Master Plan 2030 to that smaller area, and it's identifying place-based strategies for how to achieve the goals and recommendations in the Master Plan. It's also intended to develop consensus for how a region is going to evolve, to make sure that everybody in those smaller areas are all on the same page. It's informed by the Master Plan 2030, but there are also a number of ways that we're informing how these plans develop, including other countywide plans. We're looking at previously adopted community plans. We're pulling in information from the local sustainable community action plans. And we're also pulling in quite a bit of data that's being collected in each small area plan process that includes our own assessment and then also local knowledge, like what we're gathering here this evening. In sum, the small area plans are a guide for place-based development, land use, and zoning, and then they're meant to be flexible and adaptable so that they can meet the changing needs of communities throughout the county. So with that, what have we heard already about Area 11? To recap, we had a three-stage planning process. It begins with listening and learning from the community. That phase actually continues throughout. The listening never stops. We're always gaining more information and listening to what the community has to say. But we also have these phases where we're sharing and confirming what we've heard, those discoveries that we've had. And then we end with this phase where we're refining the recommendations based on the feedback and making sure and confirming that we are on board with what the community has in mind. There are a number of touchstones throughout the process, and I'm going to jump to the next slide because here I'm outlining the steps that we've taken for Area 11's planning process. We began in the fall of 2024 with informational interviews with council people, community leaders. Through the winter, we had a focus group series online survey, which ran from February through April. That led into the intercept interviews, which is just a fancy way of talking about or describing how we just talked with people, quote, on the street. We went to the budget town halls through the county in March 2025. In winter and spring, we had these one-on-one conversations with county agencies to understand their priorities and opportunities. That led to the public meeting in March and April. And then we've since been meeting with county agencies once again to make sure that the input that we've received through the public meeting, online survey, and all of that research that we've collected is well informed by what the county is currently working on. High level, important takeaways here. 3 meetings with the 3 different council people. We've had introductory meetings with 9 community leaders. The budget town hall events happened in March. There were 37 total focus group participants, 158 online survey respondents, and 45 attendees at the first public meeting. The public meeting was our opportunity to start to share and collect information about what people wanted to experience in the area, to understand what people wanted to see developed in the nodes, and to see what were the really fantastic resources, cultural amenities, and assets the community wanted to celebrate. The online survey was another tool that we used to gain an understanding of priorities. So here on the screen, we have the 6 guiding principles from the vision framework of Master Plan 2030, and they were used to summarize some of the priorities that the community felt was most important for achieving, moving towards achieving the goals of Master Plan 2030. To sum it all up, I want to provide these major takeaways. So what we heard, connectivity is key. We know that the ability to get around the area and connect to some of these fabulous resources that people identified in those cultural asset mapping and listing exercises, we need to be able to get people more safely and more comfortably to these destinations. We also heard very loudly that the waterfront is one of the area's most amazing assets, and it makes this area unique throughout the entire county. We want to treasure our open spaces here. There's a fantastic and really strong enthusiasm for open spaces, recreational amenities, and land preservation here. And there are quite a few assets that are being cherished and protected already, and there's hope that that can continue into the future. We also heard very clearly that there's a need to balance housing needs. We understand that there are a lot of housing development projects currently underway, under construction, about to come online in the area. Some of them are recently completed, and so the impacts of those are being felt, but we don't yet understand the full impacts of some of the housing projects that are planned. And so there's concern that we want to make sure that the amenities, the infrastructure, everything that all of the services that the county is able to offer is adequate for the housing that comes in the future. There's a need to enhance the quality of life throughout the area, and that's both in terms of community amenities and these housing resources that we have available to residents. And there's an important need to take a responsible and holistic approach to development, making sure that we're thinking long-term, big picture, and that we are looking at how each decision we make interplays with the next. So I'm going to break down what we've heard and what we've studied into some strengths and weaknesses divided across 4 topic areas, which are going to then inform a lot of our future conversations about recommendations. That begins with connectivity. So strengths. The Area 11 is so well connected and positioned within the region. Unlike any other part of the county, it has air, train, bus, and interstate access. We have Martin State Airport, we have the Amtrak line here. We also have this major north-south connectivity that's being provided through I-95, and then also more local regional routes through Philadelphia Road, Pulaski Highway, and Eastern Boulevard. Additionally, we have connection through the remainder of the county with I-695. So all of this means that we are well connected and well positioned in the region. We also heard and understand that residents are incredibly passionate about active transportation. That means walking, biking, getting out and moving to get around. They're currently using these modes of travel for recreational purposes most often, but there's a strong desire to move about through walking and biking for convenience purposes as well, work, errands, things like that. The challenges, however, is that there are a lot of gaps in the existing pedestrian and bike network. The facilities that do exist are often disconnected from one another. So there are these areas where a bike lane, for instance, will stop and then it picks up many blocks later. Further exacerbating the challenge with pedestrian safety and connectivity and comfort is that there are the roadways where people are biking, they're sharing with freight vehicles, with trucks, cars, bikes, and pedestrians are all in this one space, and there really isn't a dedicated and comfortable space for cyclists or pedestrians as they're moving about the streets. This is just an example here on Eastern Boulevard. Another challenge when it comes to connectivity is this area is largely a series of peninsulas, which means that there's a lot of pressure where the traffic starts to bottleneck as it's relying on a small and narrow road network to get back out into the larger area. So it's creating backup and transportation problems on the road network. When we move into open space, we start to think about our strengths. We see that those shorelines are also a fantastic amenity, a fantastic asset. There's 772,000 linear feet of shoreline, which is 60% of all of the county's shoreline. So more than half of the shoreline in the county is here within Area 11. We're also seeing 42% of tree canopy over the area, which is an incredibly high amount for an area that's within the urban-rural demarcation line. And there's already substantial land that's being preserved as parkland or in conservation through land preservation programs. And, oops, jumped ahead here. just a sec. There we go. There's a wide variety of park and open space amenities throughout. Here we have some photos that are just highlighting a few of the parks available in the area, and I think it starts to demonstrate that there's a wide variety of resources from beaches to fields to trails and everything in between. We also know, however, that when it comes to open space, there are a lot of there are a lot of gaps there as well. So there's the parkland is not easily accessible by walking and biking. There's greater connectivity that's needed between and to these parks and open spaces. Additionally, we've heard that there's a desire for more community or third spaces where people can gather, and particularly in commercial areas and town centers. And we know that conservation here is an ongoing interest, and there are substantial natural resources in the area. Moving on to the topic of community, some of the strengths here is that there are a number of anchor industries in the area: healthcare, retail, aviation, and education, just to name a few. And we've also observed through the data that there have been an increase in jobs offered locally here since 2002. So more people are finding work within Area 11. When it comes to the community, we see a lot of longstanding mature neighborhoods. That's a strength, but we also know that on the flip side, that sometimes means that these communities are aging. They're often in high density, low income communities where there's a struggle because there's high turnover and clustered residential vacancies. So there's really a need to focus more on preserving and sustaining these communities, making sure that they're age friendly and can support communities and residents aging in place. When it comes to the economy, the strengths that we have here comes back again to that shoreline, a fantastic and unique resource in Area 11. And we also know that there are a lot of civic assets that can be better leveraged for tourism opportunities. Challenges, however, we see retail vacancies along key corridors, and there are two sort of narratives playing out here side by side. We have the older commercial areas where we're seeing a cluster of vacancies, but we also have some more newly developed facilities that have not yet become fully occupied, and so we're seeing vacancies there as well. Two sides of that story here. And sorry, I'm jumping ahead here. And we also know that there's a desire to understand and better work with the regulatory communication and process, provide regulatory communication and process efficiencies to encourage and incentivize development. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our consultants with Air St. Gross to talk about the concept plan.
Great. Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. I'm Amber Wendland, and I just want to take a brief moment to talk a little bit about what a concept plan is. Megan did such a great job of walking you through a tremendous amount of information and data and feedback from what we heard. A concept plan really seeks to synthesize all of those inputs, both comments from community members and residents, as well as the data and spatial analysis that you saw that we were gathering and analyzing as part of this effort. And so it takes all of that and synthesizes it into a series of diagrams. So you'll see us kind of walk through this concept plan. It'll build up. And we use this concept plan to, at a very high level, show the kind of aspirational goals of the small area based on what we've heard and observed, and then use that concept plan to help us guide recommendations. So we'll get into more about recommendations at the end of the presentation. As I go through this section, you'll see a number of images, of photos. We call those precedents, which are just examples of things that we see across the country, in other parts of the state, sometimes even in other parts of Baltimore County. So these precedent images are just used to help illustrate what could potentially come in the future. So please don't take them as specific proposals. They're not that. They're just an idea to kind of help give a little bit of scale and understanding to some of these concept plan diagrams that you'll see. And so with that, we like to always start just by orienting everyone. This map is the same as the one that Megan was just sharing. So you're looking at the entire small area plan 11 study area. But what we've highlighted are the existing kind of key corridors and streets, as well as the railroads, the rail networks that move through the site, and just understanding how that fabric is connected across the small area. And one of the most critical pieces of the small area plan as it ties back to Master Plan 2030 is how the nodes are being represented and looked at and further studied. And so, as Megan mentioned, there were nodes identified as part of the Master Plan 2030 process. You can see those nodes that are identified here on this image that are in the dashed line, highlighting, for example, White Marsh Mall area and Aviation Station. Thanks, Megan. What we've heard based on community input are interest in a couple other key focus areas. And so the dots that are in the darker purple are some additional focus areas that we've heard of as part of the small area plan process. So that's the downtown Essex, as well as the Eastern Boulevard corridor. So you can see that each of these dots has a kind of focal point, and then it sort of stretches out in different ways based on what's surrounding. We're calling those kind of secondary focus areas or areas of impact as we think about these particular focus areas. But again, we've heard a lot about White Marsh. We've heard a lot about Greenlee and the Lafarge site. We've heard a decent amount about Franklin Square Hospital and CCBC, just as, again, key areas for us to keep thinking about, key areas of, in some cases, dynamic change, change in terms of recent development, sometimes change in terms of increased vacancies, as Megan was just talking about. So we're kind of highlighting these really dynamic focus areas as part of this concept plan. And when we talk about those particular nodes, some of the things that we like to do, again, are look at those precedent images, those examples that we see in different parts of the state, parts of the county, parts of the country. And here are just a few examples of more walkable neighborhood style development. So we really wanted to emphasize the walkability because we heard, again, as Megan mentioned, that being a very, very common thread throughout our engagement was the desire to have safer pedestrian areas, the desire for people to be able to walk to amenities and potentially stores, to have some of the vacancy infilled on key corridors so it feels more walkable. And so we wanted to show just examples of fabric that really supports a kind of safer, more pedestrianized environment while still providing access for vehicles, but also supporting things like bikes and buses and multimodal transportation. And you can see here, these are kind of a scale and fabric that might be more akin to, say, Eastern Boulevard. If we go to the next slide, we show a little bit higher intensity development, if you will. These are examples that you could maybe imagine at, say, White Marsh. So we're not saying that any of these need to belong in one particular area. We just want to give kind of a flavor to help you sort of understand when we talk about some of these nodes, just, you know, what's the potential, what might happen. And again, here just a few examples showing some different opportunities. And you'll actually notice the lower middle example is Columbia. So not too far down the road, but once again, just something you can kind of squint your eye and potentially imagine at, say, White Marsh Mall node.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in and talk about how we might be applying some of these principles that Amber is talking about to the different nodes that we have in the area. So first, I'm going to show you a series of land use diagrams that's talking about the existing land use we're seeing happening on the ground in some of these nodes today. And then after that, I'm going to jump over to talking about some of the opportunities that we're starting to identify to give an example of how we're looking at the future in these different nodes. So first, we'll start with Eastern Boulevard. Some of the things that you notice right off the bat. So land is really constrained. We have the airport over here on the right side of the page. Railroad is coming through, so that really constrains what can happen along Eastern Boulevard in this area. We're really going to have more of a dumbbell shape here. So that land on the other side of the railroad tracks, perhaps that's a fantastic opportunity to preserve the greenery. We heard a lot in the first round of public meetings that there's interest in preserving greenery and open space in all of the nodes. And so here, that land might be a fantastic resource for that. As I was saying, we might have more of a dumbbell shape happening here in Eastern Boulevard, where we're clustering some infill and revitalization opportunities closer to White Marsh Boulevard in the northeast, and closer to Martin Boulevard in the southeast. And then the infill that we're seeing would really be trying to bring activity up to the street, down by the Lockheed Martin site, and perhaps starting to cluster some development around the Amtrak stop to better take advantage of that resource, create more of a walkable environment there. Jumping over to Pulaski Highway, the thing that stands out here right away is the enormous amount of gray here. Gray is an industrial land use. We also do see a lot of this pink striped land, which is vacant. And so together, those create a little bit of a challenge in the current land use. The opportunities that we see here is taking advantage of some of those vacant areas to bring, again, development up to the roadway, to see more concentrated development around some of these key intersections. So for instance, here along Middle River Boulevard, connecting down to the very recently completed Middle River Rec Center, or over here on Moores Lane, as we understand that the Moores Lane Bridge project is still planned, and hopefully at some point we'll connect Moores Lane to Campbell Boulevard. We're seeing here, I did not mention it on the Eastern Boulevard node, but we're seeing these opportunities for greenway connections or bikeway connections. Already there are parts of Pulaski Highway that are already identified as bike routes. And so here we would just reinforce that facility and create a more comfortable, perhaps separated and safe environment for cyclists. We could also then connect that green network along Middle River Road to Philadelphia Road and throughout the region. The other opportunity we're seeing here is there's a utility easement behind or south of Pulaski Highway. And so that could be an opportunity to become a recreational amenity to connect residential, commercial, industrial development throughout. Moving down to White Marsh Boulevard, White Marsh Mall. We see the mall here. Potential infill, there are already some planned development projects underway or approved in this area. So we're really focusing on how we can complement that, create more density around the edges of the mall site. Again, here we're really emphasizing connectivity through bikeway, green pedestrian connectivity, especially along Honeygo, which could connect all the way to White Marsh Boulevard, Perry Hall Boulevard. There's the planned Northeast Trail. Already parts of it are constructed. There's just the connection that would be needed to complete the trail here along Perry Hall Boulevard. And again, we think that there are some opportunities to improve intersections. This node is the only one in the area where there's a intersection level of service D up here at White Marsh Boulevard and at Honeygo. So significant safety improvements could be prioritized there. Now, while we're talking about White Marsh Mall, we can share an example here, perhaps familiar to a lot of the folks in the call. This is nearby. This is Hunt Valley Mall. This is on the left, an aerial of the mall in 1994. It was a traditional mall interior retail shopping corridor. It officially closed in 2000. On the right, we're seeing what it looks like today. So over time, we had that internal mall broken up, a larger pedestrian plaza created in the center, development that's starting to hug the roadways around the edges, and just a higher, more walkable level of development here. Lastly, I'm going to end with Eastern Boulevard in Essex. So this area was not actually identified as a node, but we had asked residents and participants at the first public meeting where they would most like to see redevelopment in the area. And we heard loud and clear that this part of Essex was really important to focus our attention when it came to revitalization. This area, very largely commercial. And so we really try to emphasize and reinforce that commercial corridor here. There are some larger opportunities for infill development. For instance, the Park and Ride could see some densification. We also see opportunities for taking advantage of vacant and underused parcels throughout. Now, I should say, I should have said at the very beginning that the opportunities we're identifying here, what we looked for were county or state-owned properties where we think infill development might be a little bit easier to support from our side of things. We looked for underutilized properties and vacant properties. And when we're talking about underutilized properties, it might be privately owned. They might be properties that have thriving businesses on them today. We are in no way trying to suggest that those businesses are being pushed aside. We want to reinforce and support those existing businesses moving forward. When the time comes that those businesses expand, grow, move on, we want to just have in mind a vision for what's going to happen in this area. And so that's where we're flagging some of these opportunities where we think we could create a more dense, walkable, traditional form of development. So these are just some of the examples that we've started to explore and we will explore further in the Area 11 plan. I'm going to pass it back now to, I think, Laura with Air Synchros.
Thanks, Megan. So we're going to come back to that concept plan. So again, we talked about the concept plan being a diagram that shows a really high-level vision that's a synthesis of the analysis and as well as what we heard from you and the engagement so far in the planning process. So we've talked about the nodes. And when we think about connecting the nodes, we know that there's a lot of existing infrastructure that provides great connectivity from the Northeast to the Southwest and vice versa. One of the things we're thinking about is what is the connectivity within small area 11? How might we nurture that and think about creating potentially even a loop system that helps with that local traffic? And then also thinking very specifically about Eastern Boulevard, that Eastern Boulevard is more than just a roadway that allows you to get from here to there. It's also a place that we want people to be able to inhabit. And part of that is, as Megan was talking about, as Amber was talking about with a lot of the examples, making it more walkable. And so we want to think about examples where we've taken streets that are more broad and made them a little bit more walkable. And so there's an example that's going to pop up on the screen here from California, where, again, a fairly wide street with 2 travel lanes in each direction, some parking, and through a multi-stage transformation, they were able to take away some of the travel lanes, but keep a lot of the parking, keep some of the turn infrastructure, and add something that helps make the roadway more approachable as a place to be, a place to shop, a place to work, a place to visit. And they're doing a lot of this through just creating shade, adding vegetation that makes it just more approachable and cooler in warm weather, which we can all appreciate on a day like today. But it's also narrowing that crossing distance, and it's controlling the speed of traffic through the natural narrowing of the roadway. We keep going. That was obviously an example of a really kind of intensive investment, but investments in walkability don't have to be that in depth. They can really run the gamut from things that are significant investments to things that are as simple as some flexi post and chalk and paint, as you see on the example with the school bus. It's really about thinking about what are the conditions that we enjoy when we take a walk, and how do we help create those conditions on our roadways. As we keep moving with the concept plan, we want to revisit the idea of the open space network. So Megan gave a lot of the great examples of the existing park infrastructure that you have, and there really are many, many, many park opportunities in this area, a lot associated with the shoreline. And we want to think about how we connect those back to where the people are, to where the shops and the commercial districts are, so that we can leverage those green spaces and connect those into an experience people can have where that's also kind of driving development, driving commercial activity. And so thinking about how those connect back. And I think that also ties into the diagram where we talked about the roadway connections to these areas. We want that to feel like when you're on those roadways, that you understand that that is something that has a destination that's a green space, as well as being a key corridor for people who live on each of these peninsulas. We also understand that green space is something that's not just along that shoreline, but something that we want within each and every community. And that can take a variety of forms in order to support those community needs, whether that's something that's really programmable, whether that's some sort of, pocket park, whether it's trails. I think we've talked about a lot of those different options so far in the presentation. But we have a few examples here on the next slide. And you'll see along the top first 3, it's about this idea of connectivity, that even getting from point A to point B can be a natural experience where you get to experience nature, some open space, as well as just that there's really a lot of opportunity, flexibility, and possibility when you think about what open space can be in a different areas, from something that's a little bit more passive in a residential area to things that are really active in nodes. So our next layer of the concept plan is our last one, and that's thinking about land use. Since we're layering on here the existing neighborhoods, there's plenty of mature, long-standing neighborhoods here. And we want to make sure that as we're thinking about redevelopment, as we're thinking about connectivity, as we're thinking about open space, what that's doing is that's really integrating with and supporting the thriving nature of those existing communities and helping them to thrive even more. So again, this idea of walkability, it's not about necessarily this new place, but it's this new place that also works with the existing. And we want to make sure that we're also understanding through this process how we identify kind of the major gaps or the major places where there might be needs for more civic and cultural facilities. So again, this concept plan is meant to be a diagram. It's kind of a high-level visual vision in map form. And then it leads to some of the recommendations that I'm going to let Megan talk about now.
Thank you, Laura. So hopefully all of that analysis leading into the concept plan has really set the stage for understanding the overall recommendations that we're starting to explore here. So those 4 topic areas that we've been talking about are going to start to frame the recommendations: connectivity, open space, community, and the economy. And so with connectivity, there's 2 facets. First, there's bike and pedestrian safety, and then there's also on the other side, vehicular and a transit strategy. When we're talking about open space, that's conserving habitats and shorelines as natural amenities. And then we're also making sure that we're creating and protecting open spaces that are used for people actively, recreationally, and for gathering. When we're talking about community, we're talking about supporting healthy and affordable housing. We're also talking about improving community facilities and services to create and reinforce community resiliency. And lastly, when we're talking about the economy, we're supporting the existing businesses, we're supporting area marketing and in tourism, attracting folks to the area, and then we're promoting redevelopment and revitalization. So connecting this back really quickly to Master Plan 2030, Master Plan 2030 had hundreds of recommendations. The actions were organized by goal, and those goals were organized by the 6 vision framework principles: livable built environment, harmony with nature, resilient economy, responsible regionalism, inclusive planning, and healthy communities. So what we did as part of this process is read through each of those action items with this lens of Area 11 on, to understand which were going to be most relevant to this area and to the communities here. And when we flagged those ones that were relevant, we sorted them into 2 categories. The first is a recommendation or an action that we see as a refinement opportunity. When we're refining an action from Master Plan 2030, we're giving it a little bit more specificity and context in the framework of Area 11. So perhaps a particular project or particular site or a current issue. For the recommendations that we are identifying as reinforcement, that means that it's a recommendation that is still absolutely really relevant and important to the communities of Area 11. We're just not necessarily applying it to a particular site, project, or element in Area 11. We're just making sure that it's being carried forward. So here we have a series illustrating an example of the goals and the individual action items, some of which we've pulled out for Area 11. And then on this slide, I wanted to show how we're taking those, or we're linking those recommendations that we're pulling out of Master Plan 2030, and we're keeping them linked to the vision framework guiding principles here. Now I want to talk for a minute about this first bullet point here. This is going to be a fantastic example of how we might be refining one of the recommendations for the Area 11 plan. So it reads that the plan for Master Plan 2030 was to implement the federally funded Safe Routes to School program in order to promote walking and bicycling to schools through land use plans and policies. Now, from our conversations with the communities, we understand that promoting walking and biking, particularly to schools, is really important. From our conversations with the county, from the Department of Department of Public Works and Transportation, we understand that a priority of theirs is connecting safely to schools. But we also heard from the county that the Safe Routes to School program is not necessarily the avenue that they're currently using in order to achieve that goal of promoting walking and biking to schools. So as a refinement for the Area 11's plan, we'll talk about how the goal is still to promote walking and bicycling to schools through land use plans and policies. We'll emphasize that we're trying to prioritize facility connections to schools and sites that don't currently have those connections. So for instance, Vincent Farm Elementary School or Oliver Beach Elementary School. And then we might add to this a little bit more context in that we're trying to prioritize bike facilities also between parks and to recreational amenities. So we're taking that initial Master Plan 2030 action and we're reframing it in the context of Area 11, and we're also incorporating in our knowledge of the county's current tools, resources available to the county so that we're making sure that we're setting up this plan for success moving forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to all of you, the attendees, because we'd love to hear from you what your reactions are to the 9 recommendations that we've identified. So as a refresher, here they are on the screen. I'm going to jump really quickly. Don't worry about this. We'll come back to the 9 individual recommendations in just a moment. But we're going to have an activity now. We're going to do this everybody together in the meeting because we have a nice intimate group here. We don't need to do our individual breakouts. What we're going to do is first discuss the recommendations, and then we're going to identify as a group which would be most impactful for each of the sub areas in Area 11 and why that might be. To facilitate this, I'm going to jump into a tool that we have, which means that I'm going to have to stop sharing for just a second. I'll bring that tool up on my screen. And then I'm going to reshare. Okay, so at this point, everybody should see on the left-hand side of the screen a map of the 5 sub areas and then the 4 recommendations. Can I get some head nods if that's what you're seeing? Fantastic. Okay, so I'm also going to take a copy of this URL and I'm going to drop it in the chat because anybody who's interested will be able to join in this board here. So if you have access to a computer right now, you're welcome to stay on the screen with me, or you're welcome to jump into this in your own window browser. This is a tool called Mural. And so you see right here, Laura Wheaton's moving around. You see my cursor moving around. If you jump in here and you'd like to add some of your own comments, this little T box over here on the left-hand toolbar, text is going to be your friend. You're going to click that, and what we're going to do is we're going to start adding some text into these boxes. I think you can also just click in the box. But if you want to just sit back, relax, and let us do all of the work, that's totally fine as well. I'm happy to be your facilitator here. So as I said, we're going to take a minute, look at these 4 topic areas and the 9 recommendations within them, and think about them in the context of the 5 sub areas. That's Essex, Bowley's Quarters, Middle River, Rossville, and White Marsh. And I think we're going to move left to right, and starting with Essex. So take a minute, read through these 9 recommendations here. Can everybody read them well? I'm seeing some head nods, so that's good. Okay, take a minute, read through these recommendations, and then at 6:49, that's exactly a minute from now, I'm going to come back and see which ones we think are going to be most relevant for Essex.
Shannon, I can totally understand that this would be challenging to use the board from your phone. It's usually viewable from a mobile device, but yes, I agree it can be tricky to interact with. So if there's anything that you want us to write for you, we are happy to do so. So I'm seeing already that you're saying Essex is most in need of items from the community category. I'll go ahead and fill that in.
Thank you, Laura. And anybody on the call, you feel free to unmute yourself now because I'd love for us to have a little conversation. Which of these 9 recommendations do you think Essex is most in need of? Which will have the biggest impact in Essex moving forward?
Is it okay for me to go?
Absolutely.
So this is Shannon Ament. I'm the community school facilitator at Sandalwood in Essex, and I also live in Essex. Have my whole life. So the category that stands out the most to me for Essex is the community category.
Mm-hmm.
Both services and affordable housing. I think there's a large underrepresented population in Essex. It's deeply impacted by poverty, and unfortunately, I don't ever see any of those community members in these meetings. But housing insecurity is huge. Like at the school, we're over 60% for transiency again this year. And it's really hard to serve kids stability within Baltimore County. And I also like when it comes from, not feel, I shouldn't say feel, I know that we're often overlooked, you know, high poverty areas in Essex for things, green spaces and parks. For example, in the Fox Ridge Sandalwood catchment, we don't have a single park, community center, etc.
Mm.
And while there are some in Essex, they're on the other side of 702. And transportation activity is an issue. 702 is not a safe place across the street with your child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Shannon, I might try to follow up with you after this meeting, because one thing that we'd really love as part of this process is to engage a younger crowd to see what they think is ideal for the future. And we've not yet had success with that, so I might be pinging you afterwards. But I hear you loud and clear. So housing security, attainable housing is really important here, as is both the availability or presence of park and recreational amenities, and perhaps also the connectivity, a safe connectivity to existing amenities that are maybe a healthier, comfortable walking distance away.
I consider myself very involved with all things Essex and Baltimore County. And honestly, this is the first time I had heard of this project. Chrissy Erb from the FCC emailed me earlier. And of course, I'm here as best as I can be via my phone because with the short notice. But I'll put my email in the chat and I would love to talk to you more.
Thank you. I love that. So we've got a couple other community members on the call. What thoughts do you have? What could Essex most use? You're welcome to also use the chat if you're not available to speak at the moment. Lovely. I love seeing the connections happening in the chat. Jess, our brand new planner, is getting to meet folks. This would make me so happy. All right, let's take a minute. We'll jump over to Bully's Quarters then. If there are more thoughts about Essex, we'll come back to it. Thinking about Bully's Quarters, and just I'll pop back over to our sub area map so we can see where this is. Largely a peninsula in the area on the eastern side, surrounded by the water. What could be most impactful in Bully's Quarters of these 9 recommendations? David, it looks like maybe, are you trying to say something? No? Okay. And I should say that even if we are residents from a different sub area, I welcome us to think, put ourselves in the shoes of the residents in these areas, or speak from our experiences while visiting these other areas. You don't need to feel like you are a resident to be able to speak about the larger small area 11. Would it be preferable to jump around between the different areas, or just talk more generally about area 11? Let's try that. So area 11, overall, what would be most impactful in Area 11? We have these 9 recommendations across 4 topics of connectivity, open space. Yeah, go ahead. Sounded like maybe I was cutting somebody off. All right, so we have these 4 topic areas, 9 different recommendations. Which would be most impactful for the larger Area 11? So Shannon, it sounds like you represent Essex. David, Pam, and Devin, would you like to share which parts of Area 11 you're joining from? All right, tough crowd tonight, huh? All right, well, we were hoping that we could get a little bit more engagement and input here. I really appreciate what we've gathered so far. It sounds like folks are maybe getting a little hot, a little bit tired. I totally understand. Today was a scorcher, and so I myself am a little bit beat. But as we wrap up, I'll just pop over to the presentation once again and share. This is something that I can send out to everybody afterwards. We do have a phase 2 input survey that we're offering to collect input from anybody who was unable to attend last night's meeting, this evening's meeting, to try to see what they think is going to be most impactful in the area. So in this survey, we list out all of the individual actions from Master Plan 2030 that are going to be most relevant for Area 11, and we welcome all of your feedback so that we can move into this next phase where we'll be refining the recommendations, identifying which recommendations are going to be for reinforcement, and we'll be packaging that all together into a master plan or small area plan report. What's really going to be important for our project team as we create this area plan is identifying the resources and tools and strategies that will make sure that this is implementable. The one thing that is our worst case scenario is that we create a plan that ends up collecting dust on a shelf. That's absolutely not what we're going to be doing here. We're creating a tool that will be used for the community for years to come until the next small area plan comes around. So with that, I will follow up. Feel free to put your email in the chat. I'll add your names to our existing list. And otherwise, this information is going to be shared out through all of the community leaders in Area 11 and actually in all of districts 5, 6, and 7. And so we really appreciate your time, and we hope that you'll encourage your friends, neighbors, and family members to participate as well. So thank you all. Have a great evening. Thanks, team. Have a great night.
Great job, Megan.